I get deployed to Iraq, and, I saw one of my good friends get hit by an IED, and as soon as they turned around, I watched him take his last breath. And still haunts me to this day. I retired from the military with my injuries. They started giving me pain medication that spiraled out of control quickly because it gave me that false sense of happiness, and all it was doing was stuffing everything. Not only was I taking 2 or 3 at a time, I found new ways to take them. I got to a really dark place because I kept isolating, and I'd started drinking again to cover, and just so the kids would think it was just drinking and not drugs. And that led me to not want to be here anymore. And I heard, "Concentrate on me, not the storm." And it was a figure in a boat in a storm, and he had his hand out, and he said, "Concentrate on me, not the storm." I don't understand why I'm so blessed. I was in awe and confusion, just confusion because of all the horrible things I've done and the immoral things I've done, that he chose me. So I'm Mike Sinagiani, and I was baptized as a baby in the Catholic Church. And growing up, I went to catechism and went through all the, the kid programs through there. And my dad was an usher at the church. And I knew there was something different about the church that we were going to, and the things we learned about Jesus and going through the Bible. And I had a really good sense of who he was as a young child, but I didn't really know what to do with it. And as I got in my teenage years, I kept that knowledge, but I really didn't know what to do with it. So kind of being on the fence about it, knowing and believing that he was there, but not doing anything about it. And then as my teenage years came through, I was getting into trouble, using a lot of alcohol, and I figured I need to get away and do something different. So I joined the Marine Corps at 19 and, began my travels with the Marine Corps, going through and still not really having a relationship with God. And when I got back to the States, I started going to a church. I got stationed on the East Coast, and it was a Southern Baptist church. And it was different for me from growing up Catholic. And it was different because the information I pulled from the Southern Baptist church is, Catholics aren't going to heaven. And I didn't understand that at first. And I dug into it, and just the things I learned is a lot of people look at the surface. And when I was looking back on my Catholic upbringing, all the components were there, knowing Jesus and loving God and having a relationship with him. And I know typically when people hear Catholics, they think, okay, they do what they want to Monday through Saturday, and then Sunday they do a couple Hail Marys and they believe they're good. But I was taught that you always do good throughout the week. It wasn't just coming in on Sundays and repenting for your sins, or going to confession to the Father and seeing, how you could get out of whatever you got in during the week. So I had a different experience growing up Catholic. So I took that with me when I went to the Baptist church, and just found, they were going off the Word of God out of the Holy Bible. And I latched onto that and got into a group, and I worked with the youth group, but still really didn't understand how to connect with God and have that relationship, that one-on-one relationship with him. And I still was not refusing God, but not fully engaging and figuring stuff out. And even, off my heart, I was really conflicted, but I didn't want to show it on the outside. So I kind of kept that internal battle of, should I fully commit to believing in this God and doing, what he says to do? And so I did kind of the surface level things and did like a show not not like a dance show, but I did a show to like let the people around me see that, okay, he is doing the right things. I got baptized in the Baptist church, and I was part of the youth group, but I really wasn't having that one-on-one relationship with God. And so, some time passes and I get deployed to Iraq, and looking back on it now, it's was God's way of bringing me back in, whether it was right then or not, because I look back on it now, and it was a privilege to have the battalion chaplain with us. And battalion chaplains are typically non-denominational, and they cover everything. And I'd come off of convoys after stuff that we had to do, and a lot of stuff we saw, and I'd question him. How does a loving God put us in situations like this? And I still didn't know. And I look back on it now, and I wasn't spiritually mature enough to handle the truth, I guess. And, some time goes by and I struggled with that. And then I retired from the military, and, I was trying to deal with the stuff that I did and saw over there, and didn't know what to do about it. And base was, the base hospital was doing what they call exposure therapy. And that wasn't too good in my opinion, because it's like, oh, here's a truck, it's blowing up and body parts are flying everywhere. How does that make you feel? And doesn't make me feel very good. I saw one of my good friends get hit by an IED, and they threw the wrong color smoke, and the Black Hawk had to circle around because they can't land if you don't throw red to do a medevac. And as soon as they turned around, I watched him take his last breath. And that's still haunts me to this day. And it's stuff that's out of my control. But what I've learned is that I don't have to control everything. And I think being a leader and being in charge over there kind of gave me that false sense that I had to be this leader and I had to fix everything and I had to save everybody. And that weighed on me for a long time. And then with my injuries, they started giving me pain medication, and that spiraled out of control quickly because it gave me that false sense of happiness, and all it was doing was stuffing everything, and it was just getting me further and further away from God. And I was really lost in more senses than just lost without Jesus and God. I thought I knew best, and that was when I think back on my entire life, that was when I was totally in my own will and wouldn't let anybody else in. And, at the time, not to, like, the military didn't know how to take care of this. So nothing completely against them, but like that exposure therapy just made it worse for me and most of the guys I was deployed with. So there was really no place to get help. And then when I got the injury and they gave me strong narcotic pain medicine, it numbed it. And then it became, that's all I wanted to do was numb it. And I got really good at it. And I got really good at isolating myself from my family, finding excuses not to do family things and staying home just so I could numb myself. And then taking them like you're supposed to, one every 4 to 6 hours. Not only was I taking 2 or 3 at a time, I found new ways to take them, whether it was chopping them up and snorting them, crunching them up and putting them in my drinks, leaving it under my tongue to disintegrate and hit me faster. And then it became, taking one, snorting one. And then I thought I was really slick and wasn't getting caught. So I pretended I needed to go in the garage and work on cars. And then I thought no one knew what was going on. And I got to a really dark place because my wife didn't know what to do. And I had no clue. She didn't know what to do. And I kept isolating. And it caused arguments. And then I'd started drinking again to cover, and just so the kids would think it was just drinking and not drugs. And that led me to not want to be here anymore. And we had a shotgun in the basement, and it got to me. I thought it had gotten so bad that I didn't want to hurt the family anymore. And I figured if I wasn't here, that they wouldn't have to worry about me, and they wouldn't have to worry about the things I was doing and the damage I was doing to the family and the disappointment I had become. And I had the shotgun in my mouth. And, I look back on it now, and it was a God nudge, because I just prayed. I don't even remember what I prayed, but I just took it out of my mouth and prayed. And when I leaned down, the round went off and shot through the ceiling. And I started feeling stuff then that, he's tugging at my heart again. And I have something better. I have something better to do still. And God wasn't done with me. And I didn't understand what that was yet, but it was enough for me to not feel like that ever again, to not want to harm myself. And it was a tough time, because my youngest daughter and my son were in the house when I did that. And they thought I had done it, and they were afraid of what they were going to come up and see. And that's where I started getting told by my wife that I needed help. And that's what really jump started me. And I waged, chemical warfare on my brain for a long time. And just, if someone needs to hear that they can not have those feelings. I know now that God has a purpose for everyone, and that would be, the wrong way out and not a good message. And I know now that would have caused more damage to my family than staying around and fixing myself. And God was always part of that journey with me. I just didn't know what to do with him yet. So I wasn't turning away from him, but I wasn't leaning into him. And it's hard, because I really wanted, I look back on it and I wish I could have had a lifetime with God and the relationship that I have with him now. But I understand that wasn't my journey. And these things that I went through really shaped who I am today. And I think that's why I can have such a strong relationship with him, because whether I knew it or not, going through it, he was pulling me through it. And sometimes those empty prayers, like what I thought were empty prayers of, oh, just help me find $100 here or $100 here, and this will be the last time I do this. This will be the last time. I won't do it anymore, I promise. Or, make me not have the stuff fall out of my nose when I go back in from lunch at work so no one catches me. And, I finally got caught. Like, even that weekend my wife was away, and we were FaceTiming. She never said anything, but I had stuff all over my face because I was just indulging the most I could, because it was like my last hurrah. And when I got home from the airport that Sunday, she barely got her suitcases down. And I told her, I said, we need to go for a walk and the kids need to stay here. I need to talk to you. And, I always say I want to be honest with everything. And I understand through my use of alcohol and drugs that I'm not going to remember everything from that time. So it's as honest as I can remember, right? So everything I can throw out there, I threw out there to her. And, kind of to my shock, she knew just about everything that I was telling her. And that whole weekend, I must have prayed, 50 to 75 times just for the guts to tell the truth when she got home, whether she left me or not, whether she wouldn't let me see the kids again or not, I knew I had to get honest. Along that time, we decided now that I'm retired and I really needed a change. And I started seeing a counselor and for my PTSD. And this is another way that I felt God was working in my life, because her husband is the co-owner of the therapy place, and he works at the substance abuse place on base. And I was nodding out in sessions and not being able to stay awake because of all the drugs I was using. And she told me, unless you see my husband and figure some stuff out, I'm not going to be able to see you anymore and help you. So I went to see him, and, you know, even though I didn't have a close relationship with God, I still prayed a lot. And, you know, I prayed for him to tell the truth, and just took the interview process with her husband and really got honest with the questions, you know, about my using and stuff like that. And he said, well, I'm going to challenge you, after he read my interview. And he said, I want you to go to 3 NA meetings next week and come back and bring me 3 newcomer chips. And I had no idea what that was. And I fought it for the first couple days. And then on the way home, you know, the power of technology, I just said, hey, Siri, find a NA meeting near me. And I went to the meeting and I brought him back, I think 4 newcomer chips, because I went 4 days in a row. So I really got into the program, and I started getting clean, and I still was finding excuses to use, and not only prescription drugs, but stuff from the street. And I figured if I toned it down and didn't get anything from the street, that I was still doing the right thing and just using my prescriptions, even though I wasn't taking them as prescribed, whether physically or the amount. But I felt I had the pass because, hey, this is my prescription. And then I met some good guys in there that have had a lot of time clean, and I wanted what they had. They had their life starting to come together, and they had stayed clean off drugs no matter what came away or came in their way. And I went the first couple years, I went at least 5-6 days a week to this. And I found, like, the common denominators, you know, they talk about that it's a non-religious program, and it is a great program, and it got me clean. But the more and more I got into it, you know, I'm praying and I'm like, you know, they're talking about, you know, find a God of your understanding. There's only one God that I understood at the time. And they are always saying it's a non-religious program, and it is, and it's a great program. And I just found out that, you know, I could kind of cut out the middleman, and it's not for everybody to leave. Some people need that their whole life, and that's great. I found that I'm praying to a God that I understood growing up, and all I need to do is keep that going. So, you know, after about 1.5 years of finally being away from drugs, the further I got removed, the more clarity I got back in my life, and knew that, you know, God was playing a part in that. And like today, we're inseparable, my wife and I, and there's nothing that we won't discuss, and there's nothing I won't talk about. About this time, my wife and I were discussing getting back into a church and finding a good church. And we did find one, and we went, and it just didn't feel like home. The word was good, and they were teaching out of the Bible, but it didn't feel like family. It didn't feel like a family of believers. When we moved to Fallbrook, you know, we thought about it again, and we said, you know what, we need to find a good church. And we went online, and our first priority was to find a church, 1, that goes off the Bible and teaches straight from the Holy Bible, and 2, that had a great youth program. And we had 4 or 5 churches on our list to go through. And North Coast was the first church that we tried, and it was on our list. And we never left. We've been here, and the youth program's been great for our son and for my wife and I, finding the different things they do with the life groups. And she's become a leader with the ladies groups, and we have our life group that we do as a couple. And it's really solidified everything. And I look back on all the stuff I learned growing up. And I know I'm at where I'm supposed to be at. Like, I almost get mad at God sometimes because why he couldn't have given me this knowledge and this comfortableness in my faith younger on. And I always go back to, I know that I wasn't spiritually mature enough to handle the stuff back then, but I had enough in me where I wasn't completely falling away. But I knew once I got here after the second or third week, this is where I need to be. And I don't need to go anywhere ever again. I don't find myself ever leaving again and falling away from God. And just, it has helped. Everything in my life seems to be falling in place. And it seems kind of, I chuckle a little bit because it's the simple things, by reading the Bible every day, praying every day, doing stuff for others. And one of the things I always thought of wrong was, your works are part of things, and it's like a check in the box because your works. And I know now that I do things for other people because I want to, not because I'm getting points with God. And that's one thing I think some people get wrong, is they do all these things and they're looking for that attaboy from God. And I do them, and my wife does them, and it's bled off into our son, that you do them because it's the right thing, not because anybody's watching or you're trying to gain points. And I think that's one of the big things that we've done a lot over the years, is we just do because it's the right thing, and it doesn't matter who's watching or who's not watching. I just want everybody to understand the joy of knowing God and having a walk with God, because I used to think it was so hard, that you had to be this person that was so perfect and well-rounded, and know Bible quotes off the top of your head. And one of the things I learned in the military was, you don't have to know everything off the top of your head. You just have to know where to find it. And I know where to find it. It's in the Bible. And if I have questions about everything, technology, if there's some anxiety going on, I just go to Google and say, hey, what are some Bible verses for some anxiety? And I go right to the book, and it helps me through it, and it helps me help others through it, and it's crazy to see what's going on in the world and how simple it is to follow God. And you don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to have a squeaky clean path. And he loves us all unconditionally. And all you have to do is commit to him and be a light for him. And this time coming back to church, that's just become so clear and evident and easy to do. And I just love seeing the people that we get to be around, and how much we all get to be lights for Jesus and get his word out there. And that's just one of my things I love to do, is talk about it and learn more. And I'm always learning. And I think that's one of my biggest prayers almost on a daily basis, is just the willingness to be open and to learn, and always to be teachable. And I know personally I can never know everything, but as long as I know where to look it up and keep an open mind to learn, I have the perfect book to bounce facts off of, and that's the Bible. As a civilian, I teach marine mechanics on how to fix a new Oshkosh truck. And that's where I started in the military, is learning how to fix trucks. And now I get to give that back, and everything I learned, I get to teach back to the Marines, so they can learn everything they can. And even as an instructor, I remain teachable, because you never know who's going to come through your class and what experience they've had on the truck. And so sometimes I learn from the students when they come through, and then we add that to the next class. What my takeaway from that is, if I don't remain teachable with God, not everything is going to be, clear in the Bible, and not everything's going to be understood, especially if you get into the Old Testament and the way, like, I like to go back to the King James Version every once in a while, just the way stuff is worded. And sometimes it's really hard to understand, even though you read the words and they come out, so I think remaining teachable in his word means that sometimes I may not read it or my interpretation of it isn't correct, but if I remain teachable, the appropriate translation of it will come through. And so even though I think I may know the book of John, or now we're going through Revelations and I think I understand everything about it, more will be revealed to me if I remain open and teachable, is how I tie that into the Bible and God. So in October, I had started to get numbness in my face and didn't really know what to do with it. I was putting my chapstick on and I went to, roll it around my lips and I couldn't feel this side of my face. And so I wound up going to the ER and they thought I was having a stroke. So they did the stroke workup and they're like, well, sir, we don't see any stroke, but we're kind of concerned of what's going on. Do you mind if we do, a full workup? So they did a brain scan and everything. And they came back and they said, do you know you have something growing on your brain? And I'm like, no. And at the time they said it was a little bigger than an olive. And I really didn't know what to do in that moment, but I knew that no matter what, whatever God needed me for and was going to be for me there for, I was going to do. And so I immediately had an appointment with the neurosurgeon, and he basically went through stuff and gave it options. And, to ease stuff up, our family likes to joke a lot about stuff. And I called him Timmy from South Park, Timmy the Tumor. And so we nicknamed him Timmy, and we're talking to the neurosurgeon about it. And it just explained where my headaches were coming from. And basically the neurosurgeon gave me two options. He said, you can monitor it and come in every 3 months for an MRI and make sure it's not growing, or you can do the voluntary surgery and get it out. And so I was driving back home from the appointment and praying about it, and kind of wasn't really sure exactly what to pray for. So I let it sit, and I went to work the next day, and I work on base, and there was one of the gunnies that I work with in the motor pool. His motor pool is the host motor pool for us. And he was telling me about his story where he had something behind his ear, and he just was like, brother, you can't sit on this. He said, you did your 20 years in the military, you're retired, you did 20 years of taking care of Marines. He says, it's time to take care of yourself. You have to understand that. And we were on break, and I asked my buddy to take over my portion of the class right there. And I emailed my doctor and asked him, what are the dates for surgery? And he replied by lunchtime. And by the end of that day, I'd already had my surgery set up. And we were off. So this was November timeframe, and he sent me back the dates, and it was December 18th. And I had a class that graduated on December 15th. So I'm like, cool, I'll have graduate class, have the surgery on Monday. And we had winter break from class until February. So I needed 30 days convalescent leave. Well, I was already off. And the very first date he had was December 18th. And my son says to me, Dad, you push off everything. You would have waited months and months before you got anything looked at, and you did it in days. And I said, I don't know. and to me, that was my prayer, was to an answer. And that gunny coming in and telling me his testimony about what happened with him was the answer to my prayer. That's what I felt was my answer to the prayer that I needed to do the right thing. Even though I can make decisions on my own, sometimes if I'm on the fence, I know I'll get a God nudge or a God shot saying, hey, here you go. And so we get down there on the morning of the 18th, and, everybody's like, how are you so calm about this? And I said, I'm comfortable with it because no matter what, either God's going to call me home and I'll get to be with him, or he's going to use this so I can help others with this situation. And so the doctor came in and he starts explaining what's going to happen. And he's talking about, the surgery is going to be approximately 5 to 8 hours. And I'm going to spend approximately 3 to 5 days in the hospital, depending on how things go when he gets in there. And so, my wife's getting nervous and I'm okay, and it really didn't sink in that they're taking off. I had a frontal craniotomy. So they took the front of my skull off. And it really didn't sink in because I wasn't worried about the details. I knew God had the details and I didn't need to worry about what they were doing, how they were going to do it. I just knew that he had me and I was either going to be home with him or he was going to bless this surgeon's hands and take care of what needs to be taken care of. And they were concerned that it was near a main nerve that controls your bodily functions and he might not be able to get the whole tumor out. And so by this time he had to do a mapping MRI so he knew where to go in. And the mapping MRI, it was already the size of a racquetball. So from October being the size of an olive to December surgery date being the size of a racquetball, it was a rapid growth meningioma. And so right there, I was like, that's more answers. I would have put it off and it just would have swelled up. And I don't know what bodily functions would have stopped, but I know it's not good. And so that, someone from my life group has had surgeries on the head and he recommended I shave my head before I go in to give him a clean slate to come in up here. And I remember getting ready and just really reflecting right before I went in because I knew I couldn't control the fact that I had to have anesthesia and some type of narcotic in the anesthesia going in. And my prayer going in was that I didn't get that taste or that yearning to use again. And that's in my daily prayers is staying clean and not having that urge in general. But I really thought about it. I talked about it with my wife, and I know it was on her mind because I was going to get pain pills at the end. And I just went in praying that I didn't get the itch or the urge to use again, but knowing that they had to have it in my IV and that I wouldn't like it. So, going into the surgery now, I prayed about that and I felt really comfortable with that. And now come to find out that there's a team of surgeons in there. And I'm like, well, this is pretty cool. I just remember going out. They were talking to me, everything's going to be fine. So now it's an hour in and my wife gets a call and she's thinking, great, something happened. Something's gone wrong. And he's like, we're done. So an hour in, they were done and he got 100% of it. And it was really close to the nerve, but not close enough where it was attached. And he was able to get everything out. And I'm sitting there now they got me back and they brought me out of the anesthesia. And I'm sitting there and I just have this overwhelming feeling and I'm like, what was going on in there? And I wanted to make sure it wasn't the anesthesia, but it was such a strong feeling. I knew it wasn't the anesthesia and it brought me back. We had been watching The Chosen and it brought me back to like where, there's the storm and we had just been going through the tail end of the book of John and going through this, everybody's talking about the storm and concentrate on Jesus, not the storm. And it never really clicked. And then I know that I got visited during my surgery and it was this not perfectly clear scene, but it was a scene where it's really the first time in my life I heard a voice. Like usually you get a God nudge or you understand things that you need to do. But I heard, concentrate on me, not the storm. And it was a figure in a boat, in a storm, and he had his hand out. And he said, concentrate on me, not the storm. And moments later, the sun's up and we hit the beach, and he put his hand out and it says, "You're okay now, son?" And a lot of times when I was sitting, well, right after I was sitting there, and, I know people who have been Christians their whole life and followers of God their whole life and never had anything like that. And I don't understand why I got so blessed to be able to hear. But I know that I heard, and I know I saw stuff, and it just, I don't understand why I'm so blessed. And that's why it was really hard for me to share that in the beginning. I didn't share it with my life group for a long time. Only a couple close people in our life. And it just brought me back to understand the not feeling worthy of all the stuff I've done and all the stress I put on my family and all the drug use and not following my whole life like I should have. And I had a lot of self-doubt, like why me? And then I'm just thinking about it, and it was a blessing. And at first I'm thinking about it like a curse, like why did I get to see this and hear this? But I quickly learned that it was a blessing, and I thought about it and tried to understand how to use that and to help others, whatever they're going through, that he's there. And it may not always be a voice or a vision or something, but you're going to understand how to make the right decision, or when he is trying to guide your life in the right way. And even when you pray and you get a no, people say prayers aren't always answered, or you hear someone talk about my prayer's never get answered. Well, no's an answer. And it may not be what you want, but that no may be keeping you from something that takes you away from bad and points you in the right direction where he wants you, and you could be the best light for him. I was in awe. Just complete awe and confusion. Just confusion because of all the horrible things I've done and the immoral things I've done, that he chose me to visit. But all I can do is take that and turn it into a blessing for someone else, because there's always going to be someone that doesn't feel worthy or doesn't feel like they have something to offer, or why should I even bother trying to change? He's not going to forgive me. And, that goes back to even right before I found out about the tumor. My family and I were on this journey, and we wanted to get baptized. And, I wanted to publicly announce that I'm a follower of Jesus and a lover of Jesus, and following God and working on my relationship with him, no matter how perfect or imperfect that is. And I think my time in the Southern Baptist Church, you were perceived to have to be perfect and have to wear a suit and tie, and learning that that's not the truth, that we're all broken in some ways, we're all sinners, and we all have our own baggage to deal with coming to God. And I wanted to let people know that. And, so we got baptized, and I think that's just leading up to being strong enough in my faith to find out about this tumor and do the right thing. It just was, there was so much stuff lined up that I couldn't even pray for that to work out so perfect. It was the first year we were having all the kids for Christmas at the house, so they were able to help my wife take care of me. And I was able to be up enough. And I mean, even supposed to be in the hospital for 3 to 5 days, I was up an hour and a half after surgery asking for a meat lover's pizza. And I wound up getting a foot-long meatball sub, but I was eating right afterwards. And I was supposed to be in there 3 to 5 days, and I wasn't supposed to get out of bed and stand up for 2 days. And I was up within 2-3 hours. I was up standing on my feet, balancing, practicing, because I wanted to go home. And I got released the next morning to go home. And the doctor told me that if it was a race on healing and coming out of surgery the way I did, he said I'd be in first place worldwide. And I just knew that I had God on my side, and everything lined up for a reason, and got 100% of the tumor. It was 100% cancer free. And it was just everything lined up so perfect, and everything worked out exactly how God wanted it to. So I could be here today to talk about it and maybe give someone that doesn't believe or is on the fence or used to believe and doesn't know how to get back, just get back and try. That's all you got to do is try. And you know, everything is on a path for a reason, and you just get your path back to God. It's not easy, and not everybody makes it out, and not everybody can do it if they don't try. You know, if you're on the fence about whether you want to use alcohol or drugs, if you're on the fence whether you want to come back to God or not, you can't be on the fence. Jump over that fence and come back to God, and the drugs and alcohol will work on itself when you start getting back with God. Because even though I wasn't back in an official church or anything like that, I started getting back with God and reconnecting with him. And my journey took me back to church and took me to a great congregation that we're in now. And without that, it's not possible to me. And first was coming back to God and understanding that no matter what I did, all I had to do was ask for forgiveness. Honestly, ask for forgiveness, and anything could be forgiven. I saw a lot of things and had to do a lot of things in Iraq. And I was talking with our pastor JD about it before our baptism, that I didn't feel forgiven. And even leading up to my baptism, I still didn't feel forgiven. And he talked to me, and I did some praying on it. And as soon as I came out of the water, I felt it. I felt the forgiveness it just got lifted. There's too many things when I came back to God that were not possible without him. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be anything like that, in my opinion. It's the effort, and the honest effort from the heart coming back, the honest effort from the heart to want to stop using and to face whatever you're facing, and why you're using, and why you're stuffing, and why you're suppressing feelings and numbing yourself with whatever it is that you're numbing yourself with. If you make that honest connection back with God, and you honestly want to stop doing those things and face those head on, he's going to be there for you. And I've walked it, and I've been through it. And for me, it worked by getting right with God again. No matter how perfect or imperfect it was in the beginning, it got better each day, and I was able to get past it. And now, coming up in July, will be 9 years since I've touched anything. And when I came out of the anesthesia, they were talking about what they were going to give me, and I told them I just want ice and Tylenol. So I never took any pain medication coming out of the surgery. It was just Tylenol and a lot of ice. I was swollen up pretty bad. So that was like awesome to be able to do that, coming out of brain surgery and having Tylenol work like it's supposed to, and not go back to using anything, because I know the willpower I have and the work I've put in, I would never go back to that. I didn't want to chance anything. And I know I probably could have used it a couple times to help with the pain, but I would rather use ice and Tylenol, knowing that I'm not going to get that urge and the devil's not going to slip in and, oh, it's okay. One more. No one's around. Snort it again. It'll be great. As the closer I get with God, and I know a lot of people close to us are the same way. The closer your walk is with God, the more the devil comes in to try and derail you. And not today. Not today.
Maybe just sort of pray us out if you could. Maybe pray for some of the people that are
Sure.
watching, who might be in that same place.
Sure, absolutely. God, thank you for what they're doing here, and thank you for letting them, actually inviting me to share my story. My hope is that anybody out there that is struggling with anxiety, depression, anger, drugs, prescription or street, alcohol, that when they are honestly asking for it, that you help them and you touch them and you get them on the right track. Everybody deserves the shot that I got with you, and let them feel worthy, and let them feel worthy of fixing themselves and being a better person and being a light for you out in the world. And just thank you for what this family's doing, taking these testimonies in and showing them to whoever they need to across any social media platforms to be the light for you, God. And may you bless everybody that opens their mouth in your name. And may you keep us out there and shining for you. Amen.
If you enjoyed watching this story, consider sharing it with 5 people who need to hear it. And if you want to take the next steps in your relationship with God, reach out to someone who can help, like a friend, family member, or pastor.